What's up, everybody, and welcome to TinkTink.org Interviews. I'm your host, Josh Wilson, here today with David Lloyd and Barney Cumming from Powerhoof, aka the company behind the local multiplayer dungeon crawler Crawl. How are y'all doing today?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, good.
Awesome. All right. So, I guess Dave, let's start with you first. How did y'all first get into the gaming industry, and what did you do?
So I always liked programming and stuff since high school. It took me quite a while to realize that doing games was actually something you could do yourself. And I started out doing these little adventure games with this program called Adventure Game Studio, and they were just really like I just sort of put some of my friends in there and like could make them walk around. It was really easy, and then sort of wanted to that started getting more sort of complex, and then I decided to study software engineering. And out of that, I ended up getting a job at a place that Barney was working, Red Tribe in Melbourne. That was about 8 years ago, I guess. Yeah, so that's how I got in. That was really just, I felt like it was just lucky. I think it was really because the company was not, was a bit disorganized and were happy to stop hire some people that didn't have any idea what they were doing. So that was my foot in the door, basically. Yeah.
All right, Barney, you?
Um, yeah, I'm actually like in hindsight really surprised that I didn't think about just going into games when I was younger. But yeah, I guess I just never imagined it was something people actually did for a job. Um, when I was young, I made a whole lot of games and made a whole lot of board games and some really, really simple and terrible PC games made using this HyperCard program on the Mac, which were kind of choose your own adventure things with sort of silly pixel animations. But then when I was older, I never imagined you could really get a job doing that. So I went into animation. And I sort of did a bit of work in doing film and TV animation, and it was really stressful, but I kind of assumed, this is what my life was going to be, just doing this really stressful film and TV stuff. And then I moved back to Melbourne, and Melbourne just doesn't really have much film and TV work, but it's got a lot of animation work. So I just thought, oh, well, I need an animation job, and they have animation in games, so I'll just go for some of those jobs. And yeah, ended up getting a job at the company where I met Dave in my first games job. And I guess frustratingly for us, but also quite fortunately for us, that company was kind of very hodgepodge and in a bit of a shambles, and they didn't really have very good design direction. There was a lot of kind of confusion, and nobody was standing up and taking responsibility for implementation and making sure that the animations and things that went in kind of functioned the way that they were intended to in game. And because I was doing all these animations, and I didn't like seeing them not being triggered correctly in game, I ended up kind of stepping up and taking a lot of responsibility for a lot of game design things, just to try and ensure that my animations were like used correctly. And that ended up sort of developing into me and Dave kind of working a lot together and basically being a little prototyping team where we were both sort of responsible for making sure lots of the combat mechanics and things like that actually worked as intended, and the animations lined up with the code in just the right way. And that was really the start of it. So yeah.
So, for anybody interested in getting into the gaming field, be it a company or going indie such as yourselves, could y'all give any generic advice or personal advice that could help?
I mean, I think that you'll probably hear the same advice everywhere, but I think that like learn a skill and make games with it. You don't have to learn everything, but whatever you're more interested in, if it's programming or art, or I think even a pure designer who isn't going to be a programmer or an artist should still have the experience attempting and failing to do art and design and seeing art and programming, sorry, and seeing and just learning the language that you use to talk about those things. So I think that, just get software and make a little crappy game. And if you don't have good art, it doesn't matter. Just do with whatever art you've got. And if you're not an amazing programmer, there's so much software out there that would allow you to make a perfectly functional game these days without any sort of sophisticated programming knowledge at all. Like things where you might spend 3 days doing a few tutorial things and then how to make a platformer. So really just start making things, and that
it's like the best way to learn.
Will be
as soon as you've got some goals of like, oh, I've got this idea, I want to make this game, then you just keep finding step by step the next the way to do the next part of the game, whether it's art or sound or writing or programming. That's I think the most motivating thing, to be learning more and learning how to make games. And then going for jobs, people want to see that you're able to be sort of self-sufficient enough to completely make a game all by yourself. And that doesn't matter what your job is, it's always kind of really relevant. So whether you want to end up doing it professionally or you just want to sort of be a hobbyist or be sort of indie, I think that's just like having made games yourself from the ground up is really valuable.
So, excuse me. So both of you have worked in the mobile market, correct?
Yeah.
All right. So what are y'all's opinions on the mobile market? Any idea where it's headed or anything like that? Is there any hope for it, or is it just a cesspool of copy paste?
There's definitely gems that come out of that. It's very trying to make money in that market is really difficult at the moment, because that race to the bottom, games sort of going, selling for $1, and then it was kind of, you could still make a little indie game and sell it for $1, but now it's just even selling something for $1. People expect some huge production for $1, and then to have that be profitable, you've got to be selling so many thousands of copies, and it's an impossible risk to just decide, that's definitely going to pay my rent. So it's really hard not to, especially for big companies, for them to sort of not just jump on the kind of freemium bandwagon and then do all the dodgy practices. They're kind of they almost have to do that a lot of the time, because they've got responsibilities. They've got all these staff they've got to pay, and so it's I don't miss being in that market, being in that, like, thinking about how are we going to try and make people spend money in this game, because compared to just selling a game outright and being like, this game will do well if it's a really good game, then it's a headache, a massive headache.
It is unfortunate because the upfront payment model sort of has its own problems as well, in terms of just so much weight being on the upfront marketing. And if there's not that many people who are actually paying attention to who the developers are for a lot of games, so they don't know if they get ripped off by someone who makes a bad game, then they'll still buy the next game by the same guy if it's got a different title and seems to be a different game. So there's not much accountability there, and there's definitely a lot of space to just use some expensive marketing or use existing IPs or films or things that have a lot of sort of media penetration, just to ensure that people buy what turn out to be terrible games. And then once the game's bought, the fact that people find it terrible isn't going to impact your sales very much. Like the reviews and things like that in the broad market really aren't that influential on the scale of kind of market of just these huge AAA things that are going to everywhere, and the millions of sales. So it's like there's a feeling that somewhere within the free to play thing there is actually a better business model that is kind of better for gamers and better for developers, but just nobody's
I think
going in that direction at all.
that games as a service concept, which sort of became a big thing when we were working on iPhone games, where you don't just release a game and then the game's done and you've washed your hands of it. You sort of release it and that's just the start, and then you're talking to the community and working out what they want and seeing what people like in the game and adding more of that. That the problem with mobile can be that you're only doing that to try and trick them into spending more money. But with things like, I guess, early access, there's the potential for it to be something which we're trying to do with Crawl, where you're just seeing what people like and you're like, oh, awesome, that means we can add more of that specific thing. And that's something which hadn't been around for a long time before the mobile kind of maintenance cycle and games as a service concepts became popular. So yeah, I think there's some good things. It's just, it's really hard to tell if the current trends will kind of dissipate a bit and mobile gaming will become a bit more of a nice place for developers as well as for players.
Hopefully so. All right. So Powerhoof, how and why did the company get this name?
Do you want to?
Yeah. So when we were working at our first company, me and Barney, we had this, we put together a team working on this little prototype, and we were going to rearrange our desks. That sort of management let us rearrange our desks. And so being kind of wanting to sort of just stick together in our little team, and also not wanting anyone to see our screens, we kind of like clustered them in this hoof shape in a corner against this wall. And then we sort of dubbed it the Powerhoof because the management weren't too happy with us just having this little private area where no one could see what we're doing. So we had to sort of make it sound like it's an official kind of efficient way of working, and we're going to make heaps of money in our Powerhoof. It's like the most powerful, strong, efficient way of doing work in this sort of style of desks. So we had lots of sort of stories from that first job. We're still really good friends with pretty much everyone there. And so when we started the company, we wanted to kind of come up with a name that sort of that had a bit of that sort of fond memories of working together on those sort of teams, and so Powerhoof was one of the good candidates.
Awesome. All right, so I guess the gist of it is, you two worked at the same company, and Powerhoof got formed. But any more to that story of how you two formed the company?
So the company we initially worked at, it ended up going out of business. But before we made some pretty kind of soul destroying like movie tie-in license games that were not very good, and we knew they were not going to be good, and we didn't have the resources to make them good. And so at one point we sort of pitched an original IP, and me and Dave ended up kind of leading the team on that. And I think that kind of gave us a taste of making our own game and how awesome it was to actually have that freedom. And so since then, the company went out of business, and we both went our separate ways and went and worked at different mobile companies, which then ended up both getting bought by EA, and we got moved back into the same building again. But I think ever since that first time we got to kind of work on that original IP, I feel like I was kind of spoiled. Ever since then, I was just like kind of unsatisfied going back to just doing other people's stuff and just full of ideas for my own things, and in my spare time just working nonstop on just like my own little ideas in my spare time. And so I guess it had to happen sometime. And a friend of ours who was working there kind of quit, and he just made this offhand comment about, oh, I mean, you're not going to work here forever, are you? And that really stuck with me. And I just thought, oh man, yeah, I guess like I don't want to work here forever. And if I don't want to work here forever, then well, why not quit right now? Like why waste another year? So yeah, and then that was kind of funny. As soon as the idea was in my head that actually I could leave, then like just within a couple of days, everything was completely different, and I was just finding it really hard to do my work and just always thinking about what I could be doing at home. And then I mentioned that to Dave really in an offhand way, really thinking that he'd just laugh at me or something. And then he was exactly the same. Then he was infected and he was like, oh yeah, we could quit. We could do our own thing. Oh, this would be amazing. Oh, we've got to do it. So
it was weird that it just took us so long to figure that out, I think. We could just we could just go and try and do our own thing for a while and see how that went, because both of us had sort of had the means. We had a bit of savings from working full time for ages. We both, like Barney lives in his mum's garage, and I'm living at my girlfriend's or wife's now parents' place. So it's pretty convenient for both of us. We can so we were able to just like decide to spend a year burning through our savings. And it's worked out pretty good.
Awesome. So y'all may have kind of already answered this, but what's it like working in a small team compared to any larger places y'all have worked at?
It's a lot more efficient. Definitely, like you feel whenever you've got a big team, there's a lot of times where you feel like either you don't have things you're like really under the pump working on, or you're not working on the critical path of something, or there's other people who are twiddling their thumbs, and things end up just taking longer. And so working with two people where you can just chat and like work together and have an idea and then just put it in that day, that's really nice. So you don't have to have any kind of extra scheduling, planning stuff around that. And so things can just move really fast.
So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just the experience that I had on bigger teams was we'd have an idea and me and Dave would prototype it, and we'd just be zipping along at 1,000,000 miles an hour, adding mechanics every day and going really well, and be like, oh, this is awesome, this is the best thing. And then we'd be like, right, well, we need more people to make it go faster, to get all the environments and stuff in there. And so we'd bring on a handful of other people, and just as those people got on the team, just the whole machine would slow down, and then there'd be miscommunication, and there'd be constant need for meetings, and there'd be issues of the project not being ready to give a certain person enough work, and so you'd sort of make busy work for them to do because you didn't want them to be wasting their time, and then you'd end up, I think the difference between a 2-man team and maybe about a 6-man team is that on a 6-man team, just every single person on the team is putting out maybe 50% of what they would be doing if it was just a 2-man team, not through any sort of malpractice or lack of hard work, just through the amount of communication required for everyone to be just constantly doing the right thing is just, is really significant, and is, I think, always underestimated, or very often underestimated. And so, when a meeting between design and art just happens in one person's head, there's no miscommunication, and it's just 100% efficient, and it's just happening as you're working, which is kind of, I think when you've got a team, you kind of assume that like, oh, the information will just get around, but actually, the amount of effort that it takes to make sure everyone's always filled in on, oh, this guy changed his idea about the direction that he's going, because it's always iterative. So everybody's always on the fly realizing, oh, our initial plan didn't work. This needs to, I need to swing in this slightly different direction to make things work. And to constantly, I think the places where it's been more efficient have been places with an extremely good producer who is just running back and forth between everyone on the team, like asking them what's going on and filling everyone in. And even then, it's still, it's still less efficient. It's really cool just being able to have like a quick chat with one person and know like all potential information has been disseminated in that quick chat.
All right. So, do y'all normally work at the same location, or is it mostly do y'all do it remotely, or how does that work?
Yeah, remotely. We Skype. We try and Skype once a day, and we try and go, like, I'll go over to Barney's or he'll come over to mine once a week. Although then we get, like, when we get really stuck into stuff and we're on the trying to get something done to a schedule or something, we end up not doing that, and that's usually a bad thing. Usually we're definitely, it's better when we're communicating all the time, even if we're not working on stuff that requires each other.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's sort of hard to maintain, I think, when you're working remotely, and also you go a bit stir crazy working by yourself all day without that sort of human contact. Working remotely still.
All right. So, what are your both of your respective positions at Powerhoof? What do you do exactly?
Well, I do code and Bunny does art. And then
So,
we
could
basically
y'all walk?
share.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say, could you just each of you walk us through a typical day of development?
Yeah. So I tend to try and keep a schedule for myself, just like what I'm going to be working on, what hours, and I don't necessarily stick to it, but I try and like do one. Like at the start of the week, I'll do one for the whole week, like what I'm going to be working on each day, and that's just so because I'm working at home, so I don't sort of work too much or not work enough, and usually it's not working too much is the problem, but because I just work, yeah, I'll just keep working until like 9 if I don't stop myself, but basically, I have a big list of in a sort of notepad file of stuff to do, programming stuff to do basically, and usually it's tasks that are implementing a feature in the game, which I can then sort of expose some tools for Barney to be able to use to add the sort of final features. So he'll be able to add art and like add the animation and add the sort of, if it's a character, add the attacks and the damage sort of positions and everything like that, and the health and set up all that stuff. So usually I'm sort of doing more of the back end programming. And Barney, do you want to say what you do?
Yeah. So I mean, I do sort of character animation a lot of my day. I think I'll get up in the morning, and if there's any character animation stuff to do, I'll do a couple of hours of that. I'll do some like twittering. That's definitely the stuff that's hard, is the sort of community stuff and the marketing, because it's hard to know. It's hard to draw a line between how useful it is, and it's hard to know if you're just wasting time or if you're actually doing valuable sort of community stuff. But so in the morning, I'll just quickly check, Twitter and all of our things, and reply to anyone who has some sort of an urgent comment or something like that, and then do a couple of hours of character animation, just because that's what I like to do the most. And so even if I've got an annoying email hanging over my head or something I've got to do, after a couple of hours of like the thing that I really like the most, the character animation, then I'll sort of feel like, okay, I can handle doing something a bit less fun, and then I might answer a few emails and do a few boring things, and then look at design tasks and things like that. And then the afternoon until about 2 a.m. a lot of the time will be doing whatever the next big feature is. So concepting, drawing in Photoshop, doing environment mockups, or UI mockups, or just working in Word to dot point out some potential design things, or whatever the current thing is. So I guess with Crawl, I guess the Dave does a lot of, I guess, like designing and making kind of little toolkits with which for me to kind of do the final implementation, and that's been a way of working that we've found really good, so that for implementing new monsters, I don't need to get Dave to do a whole lot of programming each time I do a new monster. I've just got a little kind of tool that he's developed with a whole lot of sort of variables to cover all the different kind of things we want it to do, and so I can work pretty much on my own. So I guess that's another part of the day. If I'm doing a monster or something, then in the morning I'll make all its animations. In the afternoon I'll be putting it into the game, recreating all the animations in Unity, adding all the movement tags and damage tags and things like that to make it actually function and, be able to damage the player and have the right movement speed and have the right amount of health and all that stuff. And then there'll be a process of kind of jumping back into Photoshop and very quickly editing the animations based on sort of how they come out in game. A lot of the time stuff just works fine, but I think as for animation specifically, it's really, really useful to have the same person designing, sort of being the game designer as the person who is the animator, because purely just visual, cool-looking animation in Photoshop very often has functionality reasons why it needs to change, and so it's really useful to sort of, to be able to just iterate on that really, really quickly instead of at a company where you would have those roles separated into different people, where the designer would put it in, kind of feel guilty that this animation isn't quite what I want, have to go and sort of have an argument with the animator saying, oh, please change this thing, it's not quite doing what I want, and the animator, kind of trying to argue his case of saying, well, it just looks better like this, so I don't want to change it, and then eventually coming up with a compromise, but the animator won't have all the information in their head of exactly what's required anyway, so they'll make a change and it will potentially not be exactly what's needed. So I think that part is extremely efficient by having a tiny team. So I think I got a bit off track, but that's basically my day. It's like, wake up, mess around with animations, do annoying stuff after I've had a bit of fun. And
like Skype interviews.
We definitely found that the business side of things takes way longer than we'd always sort of assumed. It was really nice at the start when we hadn't really started doing anything. I guess we started working on a website and stuff, but it was really just working on game development. Whereas then, nowadays it's like, I've got to do tax stuff, I've got to do some accounting, I've got to email a lawyer about something, answer a million emails, keep up with the community.
When we did the first update for Crawl, we were like, I think it was like 2 months in or 2.5 months in or something, and we were like, that's easy. That's 2 months of adding content. This is going to be sweet. But actually, pretty much all of that content ended up just being added in like a week and a half, right at the very end of that 2 months, because literally all the rest of that time was just taken up with just business stuff and responding to people, and Dave organizing all of our crazy, US tax and things like that, so we could actually, get paid from Steam and just,
Is that where the IRS mob came from in the game?
Yep.
Yeah, that came from. That came from a little bit before that, when we were trying to, get a little bit of marketing visibility for our launch. We're trying to announce our launch date, and we had gotten like a few people kind of retweeting our launch date and a little bit of kind of noise about it, and then just shortly after that we realized a bit of the tax information we had about getting ourselves prepared to receive payments from Valve was wrong, and that it turns out that the time when we were actually eligible for it was actually not the time we could receive the payment. Still, after becoming eligible, we still then just needed to wait like a big question mark number of days for the IRS to actually put us on some kind of list that these companies would reference. And so, that was just a big nightmare. We were like, oh no, we've just finally got some people to pay attention to when our launch date is, and now like we've got to instantly cancel it and say, not only do we have to cancel it, but we can't even say this is the new launch date, because the IRS won't even give us a time of how long it'll take them to enter our name on this list. They're just like, I don't know, sometime in the next month maybe we'll do it. So that's where that came from, and that ended up being actually a lot more hilarious and getting us a lot more attention than our initial launch announcement anyway, and giving me a hilarious monster to put in the game, who's one of my favorite guys now, so I guess it worked out fine.
Serendipity, yeah. So, I don't remember exactly what it says, but when all the stuff nobody reads is popping up when you start the game, it says something like a grant that y'all received from Australia or Melbourne or
Yep.
so how does that work? And is this only an Australian thing or that you know of or
Yeah, that was actually only just our state in Australia. Even they have Film Victoria have a number of grants that they give to people or sort of startup assistance programs. And we sort of entered one of them um, I guess it was the first when we'd been working on it for maybe 6 to 9 months or something.
Yep.
And yeah, that was, I mean, it was good doing that, like entering, trying to go for that grant thing because it made us start to do all the business stuff of working out what our schedule will be and what our targets were for sales and our sort of SWOT analysis and I don't know a million other budget things that we hadn't really thought about much. And it also meant that we had to go in and be interviewed by them and they chatted to us and it sort of meant that we had to take that business side of things seriously for the first time, which was probably it's just a really good thing to have to do at the start. And then when we got help from them, that was really awesome because it was like this validation that even some businessy people wearing suits think that think that this might be a worthwhile game to make. So that was really really positive thing. And the money helped a bit as well. So it was basically it meant we could buy some Unity licenses. We could do some marketing without having to have that money come out of our own pocket, and also sort of subsidize ourselves so we weren't spending as much of our own savings right at the start. So yeah, that was really good. It's just Victorian. There was a sort of Australia-wide one, but then that got cancelled as soon as the new government you got a new government come in. So there's some countries have a lot of programs like that. I think Canada has quite good ones. So yeah, it's worth checking if you're a dev to see what sort of things are available, what sort of assistance.
all this business stuff sounds really scary and terrible. Do y'all recommend like educating yourselves from the beginning to do it, or hiring somebody, or what?
Yeah, we were trying to not spend too much money. So we when we started out, we didn't have an accountant. We didn't have anything like a lawyer or all that stuff. I think you sort of do it bit by bit. So I find that stuff really stressful. Barney does as well, but some people just do it really easily. But I think you do it bit by bit, and there's nothing that you can't work out, and you can just go and talk to her. You can just like ask around, see who knows an accountant, and then they'll be able to say, oh yeah, you just got to do this and this and this, and it's not too bad. It's not too scary when you do it. When you've done it, it's just you think, oh, there's all these questions I don't know the answers to when you're starting out.
I think we've been served pretty well by sort of having this philosophy that we'd at least attempt to do everything ourselves the first time it comes up, so that if we get to a point where we need to ask someone else to do it, it's because we've tried to do it and we've learned the ins and outs and we know exactly why we can't do it, instead of just rushing to get somebody else to do it right from the start and then potentially always thinking, well, maybe I could have done that myself. And so it's obviously always going to be more efficient and easier and cheaper, if you just develop the skills to be able to do it yourself. And I suppose it does help in our team. Definitely we tend to have fairly complementary sets of skills, and so if there's a task that one of us sees as just a massive headache and is really scared of, very often the other one will be slightly less scared of it, and so it will become that person's responsibility, but then there'll be another task that sort of works the other way around that the other person takes on. So yeah, that's been pretty good to kind of split up these not so fun business marketing sort of tasks between us. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone's going to need an accountant and occasional legal advice for contracts and things like that, just to make sure you get paid and that you have proper rights to music and things like that.
So, for those of us who don't know about Crawl, could y'all tell us why we should buy it and love it?
Crawl is a local multiplayer dungeon crawler where all the monsters are controlled by your three friends who are sitting next to you on the couch, so that when they kill you, you can punch them. And yeah, it's basically a big I guess, like nostalgic love letter to Gauntlet and Golden Axe and Bomberman and all the SNES era local multiplayer games that heaps of us grew up playing. Even Mario Kart and GoldenEye and all that crazy stuff. So yeah, it's an excuse to get on the couch with your friends and annoy the crap out of each other, basically.
All right. So, super important question, but how did y'all add the distortion effect to the game or the trailer? Like, I love the trailer. That's what sold me on it before it came out. But was it
Thanks.
art
Well,
or coding or both?
That's all just drawn in Photoshop. Um, I've wanted because it's done in a really simple way, just by basically using the marquee tool to select big chunks of the screen and copy them and offset them and just do that on kind of certain patterns. So I've wanted for ages to be able to get Dave to write a shader tool that will kind of be able to do that procedurally in the game, but we don't have anything like that yet. So currently it's just hand drawn, me doing it in Photoshop.
So, speaking of drawing and whatnot, the how the I am stumbling with words. The art. How do you go about that? You start drawing it very low res from the get go, or
Yeah, it really has to be drawn super low res right from the start, just because of exact like how low res it is, like stuff that's sort of 16-bit scale and things like that, big enough that you can have outlines and things. It is fine, and you could easily just sketch a thing on paper and then be confident that you'll be able to realize the same thing in pixels. But because this is so low resolution, it's kind of, I could very easily draw a thing on paper and then realize that, well, because this head is only 3 pixels wide, it's just impossible to do the face with that expression on it, or that there's no way to do a combination of pixels that actually sort of makes the mouth look like it's smiling, or whatever the situation is. And it's very much like that with arm positions a lot of the time. You're kind of limited in the way that you can make an arm look like it properly is in that position. So if you just have to work straight in the native resolution, but the native resolution being so low, it means an arm takes me 3 seconds to draw. If it was if I was working really high res, I'd spend forever doing shading and doing foreshortening and all of this stuff on every frame, just to kind of get it to look like it's functional at that resolution. And I wouldn't have the time to spend on the way it moves, or there would be such an overhead of kind of time put into every frame that if I decided I changed my mind and I want it to move differently, or I want to improvise with a potential different way for it to move, I would kind of groan to myself and be like, oh, well, that's like another 4 hours drawing, so maybe I just won't bother trying this different, more over the top animation. So yeah, definitely the working low res has some real limitations in terms of just what you can actually realize, but it allows me to work really, really fast. And for a game with one artist and about 40 monsters, that's definitely a necessity.
So, anytime someone quote unquote beats Crawl, there'll be text, a lot of different texts and whatnot. Some says like chaos radiation and stuff like that. Is there any type of in-game backstory for Crawl, or does it have one, or is it like a magical post-apocalypse, or what's going on, if anything?
Yeah, we sort of, but it's all implied, and it's all stuff that we haven't realized nearly as much as we'd like to. But I think the world specific thing, I really I much prefer sort of having hints and things around in there, rather than having like a cutscene where it's like, here's our exposition. This happened. This is what's going on. This is why you're playing the game, or this is, I just like kind of implied world building and things like that. And but there's definitely a secondary layer to that. So there's the layer of the story in the game, but there's definitely the secondary layer of all the kind of arcade machine, uh, you know, visuals and things like that, where I'm sort of trying to uh, build up an implied story that the actual arcade machine that you're kind of playing the game on is some sort of arcane haunted artifact that's if you were, or if the game were being played on an arcade machine kind of inside, it would be malfunctioning and glitching out because there's like weird magic happening inside that's kind of frying the circuits and things like that. So we haven't got as much of that in there as we would like, but that unlock screen was just one place where I managed to just sneak in a little bit of that stuff. I've always planned to have a options or configuration screen that's just full of like crazy esoteric kind of options that you can trigger to try and calibrate like weird esoteric things, with a lot of weird cult imagery and stuff like that to kind of bring that side of it out yet. But yeah, we're yet to see how much of that stuff will actually get time to squeeze in there.
I always find that I think designing game, even if there's not really much in the way of story or narrative in the game or necessary for the game, just when the designers have a core narrative in their head when they're designing it, I think that really comes through. So I've always found that's pretty important.
And I think the story in terms of this event happened and then that event happened and then that event happened, uh, is it tends to be pretty tired unless you're really good at writing that stuff. So I guess for us, it's a lot more about just building a world that feels consistent, internally consistent and authentic.
Setting a tone, yeah.
So, uh, how's the coding been like for Crawl? Like, how has it been working with Unity as an engine? Would y'all rather
Yeah,
switch to a different engine or write your own, or how's it going?
Well, yeah, working. The previous work I'd done had always been on custom engines in C++, and but I always, yeah, when we quit, I really just wanted to be working on games and not on game engines. So that's why we decided to use Unity. And it was my first experience with it, but it's really nice being able to just not have to worry about so much of the engine side of things, being able to have support for porting if we need it, and for 3D if we need it, and for so basically just being having a really flexible engine that we know we can do anything we want in, even though we're just doing a 2D game, has been really good. And I like that component style design and how easy it is to expose tools for Barney to use, because that's a big important part of our workflow. And C#'s just like really simple and easy to use compared to C++, so it's a lot more laid back and relaxed. Although I still really like engineering a really clean like bit of code in C++. I think it's not really that relevant to actually making a game. It's really necessary on a big team, but it's something. It kind of feels like it's not work which you actually get to see the results of directly. It just means that you get a game out there at the end, and so not having to worry about that stuff's been really awesome. Yeah.
Don't have to worry about any garbage collection or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, I've been pretty lazy on crawl with worrying about that stuff, and then so just which is supposed to be, you're always supposed to leave optimization to a bit later, because if you worry about it too much at the start, you end up doing a lot of work on optimization, which actually is in a bottlenecked area. And for crawl, it's that's been true. Like I've done a bit of optimization when we were trying to, we got it running on Android just almost for curiosity's sake, and on like UR and stuff just to see if we could. And yeah, so like being able to see it running on really low machines is pretty cool. And so we haven't had to worry too much about crazy optimization. We've got a pretty efficient sprite atlasing thing, which means that Barney can make thousands and thousands of frames of animation and not have to worry too much about what we're doing. But the low res helps so much because you can just fit so much in memory.
Yeah, I think our entire game, all of the art in our game probably fits into less texture space than you would get on just a single character in a high res thing where that character's got normal map and specular map and diffuse and all of that. So yeah, that's definitely a benefit of working so low res.
Nice. So, what's the design process for like a just one scene or one monster? Like how's can you just walk us through that maybe?
So I think it's a bit what we were talking about before, where I guess sort of we have pretty different roles on design in general, and we have sort of different interests and different strengths. And sort of when it comes to really mechanical based stuff, that tends to be something where I'll do the initial design, or I'll sort of lay out to Dave, these are the behaviors that I want to facilitate, and then Dave will figure out, right, well, this is this is the tool, and these are the sort of variables that would allow you to realize the most number of those cases without just completely unique special case stuff being done for each. And we'll sort of discuss that a bit. He'll design something, and then he'll come to me, and I'll do the art, and I'll put it in the game, and I'll test it, and I'll implement a test case, and I'll try and get it feeling right, and then they'll generally be like, okay, this is the couple of ways that we just need to tweak it to get it to be, to get it to be able to realize just all the tiny little things. Dave will do a round of tweaks on it, and then generally that'll be a finished tool, and I'll just use that to my heart's content down the track. From then on, I'll just be able to like make a monster, implement it, set all its variables, tweak all its stuff, and do that without Dave having to spend a whole lot of unique time on every one. And then maybe down the track I'll get a special case, like for example, I think the spider I had kind of, because Dave tends to make these tools very versatile, I'll be able to hack in a way with the tool to emulate something a little bit like the functionality that I want, to kind of test to see if it's any good. So with the spider trapping the player in the web, I was sort of able to trick the collision and damage system of the damage effect of the web to kind of simulate something a lot like the player being stuck in the web. And then I was able to play with that quite a bit to see if that was actually something worth pursuing. And then, we decided, oh yeah, this is cool, this is worth pursuing. And then, then I was able to sort of show that to Dave, and he was like, oh, cool, I'll do the little bit of, special case code required to kind of make a different kind of damage status thing that would do this in a slightly nicer way. So yeah, that it's a lot of back and forth between us, but I think that's definitely been something that has been our strength, kind of perfecting this system for, instead of just like sort of hand programming very specific things, of Dave kind of building little toolkits that allow me to do a lot of design work kind of on the fly on my own.
Cool. So, what are your favorite monsters?
I really like the Minotaur, just the feel of him, his charge, when you like get someone stuck right in the charge, and they just get hit multiple times. It's got that really Street Fighter-y feeling of multiple hits in one big swipe kind of thing. I really like that.
I really like the the guy with the little mask who teleports backwards. He's not incredibly effective, and the community seem to have nicknamed him Gumdrop, which I find really hilarious, and I feel like that kind of diminishes how how intimidating and badass I had always imagined that he was. But yeah, his damage effect is kind of a reference to Bomberman with this kind of vertical line damage thing that needs to be avoided, and I just really like doing the backwards teleport. It feels amazing to me every time I successfully dodge someone's attack with it, even though I probably, end up just like teleporting around like an idiot and getting killed pretty quickly. It still just feels satisfying whenever I do pull off that one like successful kind of focused teleport.
My little brother is a fan of the basic rat. He's like, don't nerf it, please.
Yeah, that was one of the first monsters we put in, and was always a favorite, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
It feels really responsive. It's nice just dashing through and faking people out and then getting to do a swipe and then dashing after they've finished it. So,
yeah. There's definitely a lot of guys like that I think down the track I'd like to do. Guys where I just think they feel really good, but maybe they're only tier 1 or something. I'd like to do, add something to the evolution chain where you get a stronger version of a pretty similar sort of thing. Just the ones that I really like to kind of get more uses of that mechanic in the game. Currently, I've still been able to keep pretty much every monster to sort of have like a unique way of playing, but I think there's definitely room to just sort of do a few more variations on something like the rat that are a little bit different, but just to have that mechanic in there a little more.
So, is there anything in the game that y'all wanted to add, but for some reason or another it had to be cut, or you just couldn't add it?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a massive list of stuff we want to add. I think any trope from dungeon crawlers and there's so much. There's a huge wealth of content that we'd love to just keep drawing from forever. And at some point, we're going to have to say, "Oh no, we've got most of what we want in. We should probably stop."
I think.
But at the moment, we're kind of at a point where we're just like, we can keep adding stuff for now and see how it goes.
I think.
Go ahead.
There's a lot of RPG things in terms of character customization that it would just be so awesome to have, getting different kinds of armor and when you level up, actually choosing what stats to upgrade and all of that kind of RPG stuff, but to have that happening just super, super fast in a really sort of cut down arcadey way. That stuff is just that's definitely always been the dream. But yeah, I mean, in reality, with the visual customization, there's like 1,500 frames for the hero that want to be redrawn for every possible armor variant. So I don't think that's going to happen. And that's really disappointing because that is such a classic sort of trope of the RPG thing of like seeing the guy that you've built, seeing like the hat that you've put on him and the armor that you've put on his body. And so that's something that I guess, is just a bit of a limitation of pixel art. But yeah, I mean, I think it's always going to be a process of just like, maybe I get to realize 60% of the stuff that would be awesome and, have to kind of draw the line before it gets unrealistic. And I mean, I guess that's why so many games have a sequel where they're just, finally I get to do that, that other 40% or whatever. So I don't think we're ever going to run out of our list of things that, we would be able to, we would want to put in if we had infinite time and money.
Has there been anything that y'all have created, such as a monster, an item, or anything like that was completely, ready to be implemented, but it just didn't work?
Well, there was actually a sort of what was meant to be a better version of the rat. There was this sort of hound dog thing, and it was subtly different than the rat, because I think because it was bigger and felt like it should be kind of have a bit more weighty movement. It just never felt right. Never felt as fun as the rat. So that's one that we ended up just leaving out.
Yeah, I put it in and made it work, and then changed it and changed it and like changed it about 3 times based on feedback to try and get it to work, and it never felt good. So yeah, he's out for the moment. There's also a wolf that I animated that has like a sort of flaming tail, and it was a similar deal. He just didn't quite feel right, and we ended up cannibalizing some of his attacks to give to other guys. But yeah, I think it's actually been a bit of a thing of getting these 4-legged kind of monsters to feel right has just been a little more challenging with the art limitations of the kind of orthographic view and the characters just flipping left and right. It's just been something where kind of a wider character is sort of harder to make them feel, I guess, tight. You know, they end up feeling a bit clumsy when they're quite a bit wider instead of sort of being thin and standing vertically. Yeah.
In terms of stuff getting done that doesn't go in the game, we've actually been pretty efficient, I think, compared to. It's another thing just from working on a small team, working in big teams that I've done before. There's so much waste. There's so much time where like someone spent weeks working on some stuff, and then the designer's like, oh, actually, I forgot to say, but that's, we weren't going to put that in anymore. And so it's like, oh, okay, that was wasted work. And so many features that I'd sort of work on as a programmer and be like, oh, okay, we've got this feature in, and then it just wouldn't ever end up being in the game because there wasn't really a reason for it. It was just a sort of something to check off on the game designer's sort of big document of things that they might want for the game, but didn't really have a specific plan for. So yeah, it's been pretty good in terms of efficiency. Most of the stuff we do goes in. We do have menus have been really hard because they just take a lot of iterations. So Barney will sort of do a mock-up, and then we'll sort of try and get it going in game, and then it's sort of got to make sense for the user. It's got to flow nicely. They've got to know just inherently which button to click to do what, and that's
a lot harder in crawl. It needs 4 copies of the interface up on screen, potentially all next to each other, without it getting too confusing. Which I think is so
one for each player. And the low pixel kind of low resolution. It's just been that's been something where trying to find the perfect balance of usability and looking nice has been really hard. So we've actually still got menus in there which are just we'll finish these menus later. It's got sort of work in progress text down the bottom. Because we want to do something really nice and juicy and awesome looking, but we've done a few iterations and just haven't found that thing that clicked yet.
We've also got some old store items that aren't in there currently that maybe will make a resurgence at some point, but just a few things where you would buy items for the monsters, not just the hero, and so some of that stuff was really, really cool back in the day. But I mean, initially we had it so all items that you bought worked on both the hero and the monsters, and that was just it was too crazy. It was really, really awesome, but yeah, it was too crazy, especially when you had like spinning axes and all sorts of stuff flying around, kind of potentially around all 4 monsters and the hero. The screen was just a big mess of stuff going on, and you couldn't really understand it. But there are a few really cool things, like there was this cadaver burst kind of voodoo curse thing that you could get, so that whenever your monster died, there was just a very short kind of 3, 2, 1 countdown above the dead body, and then there was a whole lot of explosions happening around the body, and so you had to really realize, like as the hero, when you killed that guy's monster, to see that like countdown come up and get the hell out of there, or else you'd often get killed. And he'd take the hero place back from you just after he killed you. And that was really awesome. I'd love to find a place to get that back in there. But,
there's
we'll
another spell, which is one of my favorite ones that I'd like to sort of see. Which is this, it's pretty simple. It just like sucks a monster toward the hero. but it's really good at just faking people out. And I got really good at using it. I think Barney was never as good as me. He never enjoyed it as much as me. I just loved using that. Just like
I just didn't like the art that I had for it.
yeah, that's probably it.
It just didn't match
so there
up
is
with
a
the
few things
mechanic.
that we'd like to still get back in.
Yeah, I think.
But there's not much that we've cut and decided, this definitely won't see the light of day again.
Yeah, I think usually down the track, we can sort of deconstruct the thing we made and, kind of suck some, get the little bits of value out of it and kind of repurpose it into something we use later on.
All right. So kill streaks and care packages, yeah. So local multiplayer is freaking awesome, and
Yes,
it's one of the reasons why Crawl is so awesome. But some people don't have real physical friends, so I'm assuming online multiplayer is a thought that y'all have had. Will it be added, and if so, is there any type of timeline for that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at that quite a lot recently, and it's just a tricky feature to add. It's a big chunk of time, and we didn't really ever want to add it unless it was going to be as good, if you know what I mean. Like, if we'd probably prefer to have the game be something that's that people think is really good, both any way you play it. And so if we're adding online, we'd want it to be good online and not kind of half broken. So the big limitation for us, I think, is just the time it would take to do. And so I'm not really sure at this point if it's something we'll be able to do before we release the final version. It's definitely something we would love to have, though. It's just really hard to tell if it's possible.
I think that's been a tough thing because every aspect of the game developed out of design specifically for local. The whole premise of the game was kind of designed to have you griefing each other, and that's really fun and really funny when you're sitting on the couch next to each other. But there's things like that where I'm not sure if they wouldn't be more in the direction of just frustrating if it was actually just with anonymous people online. But yeah, I mean, we're investigating it. But yeah, it's a huge thing. Like, I think people definitely underestimate how big of a task it is especially for a 2-man team as well. And so, if it's something that's going to take a lot of months, that means a lot of months of Dave working on that and not on any content or anything like that. So it brings early access, and it brings general development to a halt to stop and work on that. And yeah, I just, local multiplayer, like, is a valid thing. And I do think that, like, it is perfectly valid to make a game that is a local multiplayer game. But it definitely does kind of tug at the heartstrings when someone's contacting us and saying, "Oh man, I really want to play this game, but I don't have anyone that I can play with locally, and I've got these friends online, and I definitely feel for people in that situation." And so we'd love everyone to play it, and if we had all the time and money in the world, we'd definitely have online, but for now we'll have to wait and see.
So any possibility of like a Steam Workshop support or a level editor, or just so people can make levels or creatures, or maybe even implement online multiplayer themselves, because modders are crazy.
Yeah. I'm not really sure how you put together mod support. I'd have to look at that stuff, because there's been quite a few people who've been interested in that, and people who've been sort of drawing characters and excited about the sort of monsters that they're having their own ideas for monsters and things. And I think with levels, people talked about wanting to put in, wanting to sort of create their own layouts and things like that. It's just like another one of the millions of features that we'd probably like to look at if we get the chance.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just something that I don't think either of us are sort of particularly familiar with the scene for modding these kind of games, and so it's kind of something that we hadn't considered. But because lots of people are talking about it, I've definitely got some homework to kind of go and actually have a look at some vaguely similar types of games and see what they do with their mod support and see kind of how it goes and try and figure out, is that something that would work for Crawl?
All right. So, what are y'all's opinions on early access? Do you recommend it, or is it kind of like a per basis type of thing?
I think it just depends largely on the game and the situation for the developers. I think for us and for Crawl, it made a lot of sense. And but yeah, I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages. We saw we didn't get as much press as we thought when we launched, and partly because of the fact that a lot of websites, a lot of sort of press, are going through different stages of not knowing how to deal with early access games, whether it's meant they should deal with it like a full release and give it a review, or whether and I think a lot of websites at that time, and probably still, will just sort of ignore those early access releases unless they're huge. So I think there's definitely risks there. But then for us, the community and the stuff that's been happening since has been really good. So we've actually got, our sales have been continuing pretty well. And that's been really nice, feeling like we can just keep working on the game and keep adding stuff, and the community's still there. Games that are meant to be a linear experience where you play it through once, I don't really see them having a place on early access nearly as much. You really want something. I think for Crawl, I felt like it's the sort of game where you could have some friends around and play it like you'd play a board game, and then like a month later, then there's a new update. You can have some friends around and play it like you've got, I just got the expansion to whatever board game that we were playing. Let's get together and play it again. I sort of like that idea, that concept. Yeah,
I think it's a really good environment for developers, obviously, to be able to kind of make your game in a more modular way, where you can make a kind of smaller version of the game, put it up for sale, and kind of gauge public interest on early access, and then go, okay, well, how much interest am I getting? And so how much, should we continue making this kind of thing? But people are definitely using it for a lot of games that just, firstly, shouldn't just are not appropriate games for early access. And also, I think the very kind of broad variety in philosophies on how finished a game should be, or how much content there should be in a game before it goes on early access, that's giving people a very kind of soured experience. And I don't think early access will ever be kind of what it's supposed to be without there being some incredibly reliable way of taking a glance at an early access game before you've bought it or played it, and instantly having a sense of how buggy it is and how far along in development it is. So I think, and I'm not really sure if that's possible, but I think that's definitely something that, that's the big problem for people, is that one game, so say Crawl, we tried to make sure that we don't put it up for sale unless it's a thing that basically, in terms of gameplay, we would be proud to sell as a finished product. But, and some people have that same philosophy, but then there's a lot of people who, put up something where it's just, this is like my initial concept for a thing, and I don't even know if it's really going to turn into a game. And obviously, once you've paid money for a couple of things like that didn't go anywhere, then, you just want to stop paying money for early access things. So, yeah, I think some way to sort of give people an idea of what state these games are in relative to each other before they've paid the money, I think that would be necessary in order to really get the most out of it.
All right. So, what are like the future plans for Crawl? I mean, I'm assuming more environments, more monsters, etc., etc.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. More environments, more monsters. Basically, just as much stuff as I'm allowed to put in the game. By my like pocketbook kind of. Like without just making content until I starve kind of thing. So if people keep buying it, then I'll get to put more in. But if interest dries up, then I won't. So it's kind of, we've designed it to be very modular with the procedural generation, so that you've still got a complete game of Crawl already. And we can add more. It's not like there's a big hole in the content, kind of where the stuff that we haven't added is missing. There's not like, oh, we go from level 1 straight to level 5 because we haven't got levels 2, 3, and 4 in there. It's like it still plays as a complete game, and we sort of intentionally designed it like that so that we can just feel our way and see, well, how much more content can we add. I think if I had all the freedom in the world, I'd add 20 bosses, but considering how long they take, we're going to have to be really careful about figuring out how many bosses we can get in there. So yeah, it's kind of, we're just going to expand our kind of view as we go, expand or contract. And I think probably some of that is going to happen post-launch, I think, because once we launch, that's going to be another point of learning how much interest there is in the game. There's definitely, early access is a very niche thing, and so the number of sales you get from early access is still not a perfect indicator of how many you're going to get when you go full. And the whole concept of ticking over from an early access to release to a full release is something very new, so we don't really know what to expect in terms of sales, if there'll be a massive spike in interest now that it's not early access, or if people will have already kind of burned up their interest in the game, just kind of ambiently seeing it around before they've actually played it. So after release, we'll get a sense of a really good sense of how much, how much basically this can support us continuing to work on it. And it's like, if we can afford to continue to work on it, then I'd still love to, just add free updates to the final version for as long as that's profitable.
So, could we possibly see any, super broad and terrible question, but could we possibly see any other human characters that we can play as, or play as one of the gods that you choose to worship in the beginning, or anything like that?
I think for the hero, it's unlikely, just because in order to use all the weapons, the hero has, I think, as like, I don't know, well over 1,000 frames, and so I always had in my head that like it would be awesome to have that sort of rogue mage warrior kind of choice, but I think that's more something that we'll be trying as much as we can to build into your customization options in the game. So you sort of start off as a blank slate, and based on what items you end up buying, you end up going more towards mage or rogue or whatever. And we've got some ideas of tweaks maybe to the sort of stat upgrades and leveling up stuff that might help make that feel a bit more like that. But in terms of just the visual side of like, this looks like a whole different character, I think that's unlikely before full release, just because of all the animation frames. I do have a bit of a sneaky idea of maybe a way that we can do a little bit of visual customization, but yeah, it still needs prototyping. I still need to see if it would actually work or not. As far as playing as the gods and stuff, I've got an endless list of crazy, like, huge monster playable characters that I want to put in there, and there'll definitely be time to do a lot of that at the end. I've got a model of Gabe Newell that I want to fight against and that I want to fight as. Yeah. And I'm dying to put him in there and make him do all these like really crazy badass attacks. And so yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that. I think big monsters, kind of just putting them in there as kind of rare statues, like the Taxman, I think that's something that's a definite possibility, and really the sky's the limit with what we can do with that. Like the system's pretty robust, and we can easily put in all sorts of massive monsters.
All right. So I'm going to assume not, since previous answers. But would y'all ever, if you could, let's just land of imagination here. If you could, would you ever want to make like an HD high-res pixel art version of Crawl, or like a different types of filters or anything like that? Or are you just completely content with the low res?
I mean, I definitely wouldn't do a 2D low-res version. Down the track, if I felt like I could develop a really good 3D art style, I would potentially do that, because I feel like sometimes in gameplay, the 2D thing, just try and have 2D orthogonal character sprites which only flip left and right, but having full 360 directionality in the attacks, that does have some limits over just having a 3D game where your character actually just rotates 360 degrees. So, I mean, that's something that, maybe for sort of Crawl 3 or Crawl 4, by the time we're, billionaires with our solid gold rocket cars, maybe then we'd be able to, get a couple of our friends on board who are 3D artists to kind of work with us to do something like that. But for the time being, the low-res art style is definitely something that is not just an aesthetic choice. It's like there would be no game if it wasn't for that art style. That art style is a tool that allows two people to make a game with 40 monsters in it. And so, yeah, it's just as much a factor of constraints as it is with of aesthetics, and it's just something where we try and find some aesthetics that will make those constraints still fun and exciting. But I don't think I'd like to. Like, I don't want to define those monsters more clearly. I really like seeing people do like their concept art, or their impressions of what the monsters and characters look like, just because it's so low res and there's so much room for interpretation, and your imagination does 90% of the work. Like, I'll see like if I was to draw the Crawl hero, if I see someone else drawing the Crawl hero and they're drawing on little like belts and scabbards and little potions and things like that you kind of do see in the art when you're watching it, but none of that stuff is actually there. So yeah, I feel like that's actually, I don't know, that makes the whole thing a lot more compelling for me, that just how much kind of people are inventing. And there are a lot of characters that if I had to define them really clearly, I feel like they lose a lot of what's cool about them. And yeah, so I'm pretty happy to keep the physical structure of this guy's weird pixel head kind of mysterious and up to interpretation.
So if could Crawl ever have a sequel? Could you see it having a sequel?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely.
Definitely.
I mean, the core concept has a lot of room to. Yeah, there's so much you could do with it.
I mean, still. Oh, sorry.
I think we'll definitely be wanting to try some different ideas, I guess, once we're sort of finished up. So I don't think we'd instantly be doing like, it won't be like a FIFA thing where there's just one every year. but I can definitely see us doing another Crawl thing down the track, using the same mechanics, and then but with a potentially 3D, or potentially with a different art style or a different setting, like a sci-fi setting or something like that. I think there's lots of ways it could work.
I feel like there's just the pure concept of having a game where instead of relying on AI, you rely on having friends there who are kind of playing the role of all the enemies and all the bad things and all the computer decisions. I feel like there's so much more potential in that idea than just what we've done with Crawl. And definitely the initial ideas for Crawl were something that's, 1,000 times bigger than just fighting in a dungeon, and potentially, and there's all these other ways you can do it. And, you could go further back out into a full RPG and have the four other players going out and kind of controlling the NPCs and the things that they say, and controlling the story and heaps broader things. And then there's also the angle of making it bigger and maybe doing online things and using some kind of Dark Souls kind of multiplayer concepts where kind of people are just propped into other people's games. So something where it's a much bigger game, fighting much more, a much higher quantity of monsters, but all those monsters, every individual one is controlled by some player somewhere online, and to have some sort of system where it's like, in order to kind of have your chance to have your one-off run as a hero, that's kind of a permadeath roguelike sort of thing, you have to pay the toll of having to be monsters for quite a while in other people's games. So yeah, there's infinite potential, and definitely after Crawler's done, if we are successful, then down the track, I'd love to just see how much further we can push it.
All right. So do y'all have, this might be too early, but any type of timeline of when the final version of Crawl will come out?
At the moment, we're kind of trying to avoid telling people, oh, we're going to have it done by this point, because we've been kind of doing that for a while, and then just getting really anxious whenever we realize, oh, we're not going to make this deadline that we've made up for ourselves. So at the moment, we kind of feel like we're in a pretty good place where we're enjoying adding content to the game, and we've got a plan for, okay, these are the features we're going to want to release with. And we're kind of happy just to kind of keep doing those features, but also just feel like we can add just crazy ideas we come up with at any point, and not have to feel like, oh, we can't add those crazy ideas because we've got to work to this schedule. So yeah, no specific date, but I'm assuming sometime this year.
All right. Okay, so now I have a few questions from Reddit. The local multiplayer game subreddit, to be exact.
Awesome.
All right, so Redditor, let's see, Celestia Mage, I hope I pronounced that right, had a few questions. First being, are there plans for additional modes like a more arcade-style single-screen horde mode that rotates through players as they die for a more straightforward leaderboard competition?
We've been tossing up ideas like that, but no concrete plans, no things we've decided, yes, this is definitely the one we're going to do. But yeah, we're definitely thinking about stuff like that for sure.
All right. Second question is, with more local multiplayer games adding additional players like Clusterpuck99 and hashtag iDarb supporting 8, or is there ever consideration to support more than players of 4?
Early on, I actually had it I had sort of stuff in where it was really flexible and we could just add more people. But we kind of realized that even at 4, the game is so chaotic that I think any more players would just be, you wouldn't have any idea what's going on ever. It'd just be explosions and screen shake. And
more players would definitely be something for a Crawl 2, or for, something down the line where we've really built it from the ground up to facilitate that. But there is a lot of, I'm definitely kind of looking like a little bit longingly at some of this Twitch integration stuff as well, and kind of daydreaming about how awesome a Crawl 2 could be, with not just like the players who are playing live, but also with an audience watching the stream who are able to kind of affect the world and do all sorts of crazy things to the playing field and stuff. So yeah, potentially confirmed millions of players.
All right. And his last question is, did you draw inspiration from other counter-operative games? There aren't many like this, so I'm more curious to hear if there's anything comparable that you know of.
Yeah, not really. People talk about Munchkin, which is a card game, but we haven't actually played it. I think we just sort of ended up with what it is, without really having a specific inspiration for the actual asynchronous multiplayer. Although drew inspiration from a lot of games and dungeon crawlers and things like that for the themes and tone.
Right.
Yeah, it was really, it just came out of a little local multiplayer game jam, and me kind of being a little bit obsessed with roguelikes at the time, but I kind of I like action games and I like arcade games, and so I felt like I'd much rather, you know, do an action arcadey roguelike, and just the idea popped into my head that I wouldn't have to program any AI if I could just, you know, in the local multiplayer thing, just have all the monsters controlled by other people. And so it sort of grew out pretty organically, and then since then there's been Evolve and a few things like that coming out, and I've been waiting to get my hands on that to actually play it and see, as you know, like how have they dealt with the weird imbalance that you've got with 3 against 1 or but yeah, I actually haven't had a chance to play that, so there hasn't
DLC
really been
probably.
any. Yeah,
We played a lot of Left 4 Dead with each other when we were back at the place we first worked together. So maybe that was an influence from a long time ago. Well, not too long ago. But
yeah, I think probably unconsciously that thing of, you know, that there are people like controlling both sides was probably subconsciously an influence, because that versus mode in Left 4 Dead was, you know, we played that constantly for about a year.
All right. So, any other platforms, you know, besides PC, Mac, Linux, you know, that Crawl could potentially come out for?
yeah, definitely. We'd love to get on the consoles, and we're sort of planning to do that. We'd probably aim to get the PC version finished first, and then have a look at ports and stuff like that. Because definitely, it's a sort of game that makes sense in the living room and sitting on a couch, which is kind of how I play it because I've just got it on a laptop anyway. I think a lot of people have that sort of setup now with a laptop or something. But yeah, definitely consoles makes a lot of sense.
All right. So, have y'all tossed around any ideas for a non-Crawl related game that y'all might make in the future?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got heaps of things that we want to do outside of Crawl.
So, if y'all had unlimited time, budget, what would be like your dream game to work on?
Well, I think I've got a pet project adventure game that I want to make. It's never been something that I felt like, this will make like heaps of money, so we should drop everything and do this. It's really just something that I really enjoy working on.
I'm not so excited by adventure games, but I'm really excited to work on something with something higher res, with a whole lot of character acting animations with like stupid facial expressions and stuff. So I'd actually really like to do the adventure game as well. And then there's just infinite random other things. I want to do like a proper horror game. I really want to do a cyberpunk game. I'm constantly trying to design things that would sort of work well in a cyberpunk universe, but nothing's quite come out yet.
Man, going a little fanboy on y'all, but possible human versus humans or monsters versus monsters mode, maybe.
Yep, that's also stuff we've been tossing up in our heads.
Yeah,
how to get some of that stuff in.
There's
definitely.
There's a boss idea that Dave had ages ago that I wish so much we would get the time to do, which is something where the hero who challenges the boss, they kind of transform and warp into a single huge powerful boss, and then the other 3 people all get their heroes to kind of take that one guy on. And so having the 3 heroes working together would be awesome. I mean that's definitely something that in the initial design there was a lot of different modes of play where you'd for a short period of time you'd have 2 heroes fighting 2 monsters, or 3 heroes fighting 1 monster, and things like that. And that stuff ended up, you know, obviously because it's sort of more peripheral stuff, not quite making the cut. But there's still potentially time to see if there are little places here and there we can slide in some different kind of dynamics. And definitely I'm really curious to see what monster versus monster would feel like. But yeah, we'll still yet to see if we do find place for all that stuff.
Is there anything that the fans could do to help y'all besides just buying the game?
I think like we've had a lot of people streaming and playing the game and like let's plays and stuff, and that's actually been amazing for us. Like, it's firstly, it's been really good because we get to see other people playing the game and talking about it as they're playing it, and that really shows us, oh wow, this person's not happy with this part of it, or they thought this bit was unfair, or we didn't communicate how this mechanic was supposed to work very well. But secondly, it's just other people see that and they get excited about the game as well, and that's just awesome.
Definitely.
I'm just really happy to hear people's stories of them enjoying it with their friends and stuff and their family. They're the best stories to hear, definitely.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the best thing people can do to help us out is just spread the word that Crawl exists to other people that might like it, because that's definitely, as an indie studio, as much as we work on trying to make the game good, actually the thing that will make the difference between us being able to pay the bills or not is just how many people we can get to know that the game exists, because it is a niche game, but there's easily enough people who fill that niche if they all knew that it exists. But we don't have some crazy marketing budget to, billboard every website to get everyone to go and know, oh, Crawl, this is a thing that exists. So that's definitely our biggest challenge, is just, communicating and people finding out about the game. So anything people can do to help with that, would definitely be amazing.
All right. So y'all were at GDC this year. Anything y'all learned or saw that y'all would like to share?
The best thing about GDC is just chatting to other developers. I think met heaps of people who are sort of like-minded indies, and it's just really nice place to chat to people that are and people that like we really respect their games, and like we chatted to the Broforce guys and the guys from Gang Beasts, and it's like, oh man, we sort of look up to all these other developers, and then you find out, oh, they actually they look up to people like us as well. It's like really cool, mutual kind of admiration.
Yeah.
Like that stuff. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's right.
All right.
Oh, I'm trying to find a place to squeeze in talking about collecting ice, but maybe I don't need to.
Well, if you feel like you need to, I mean, go ahead.
Well, in GDC, we did uncover some pretty devastating sort of issues with the industry, involving how hard it can be potentially in San Fran to actually keep milk cold, and how hard it can be to actually collect ice and keep the ice from melting. But yeah, that was our only disaster. We went on a bit of a campaign of getting other indie developers to do cameos in our short videos of us collecting our ice to try and keep our milk cold, and we got a surprising number of guys happy and willing to come and deface this ice machine with us, including the Strafe guys, and Gang Beasts. It was pretty awesome.
So, any upcoming games, be it indie or otherwise, are y'all looking forward to? I know, Evolve was mentioned, but
I mean, Bloodborne is a pretty obvious one. Dark Souls was a huge surprise to me. I hadn't put more than maybe 12 or so hours into any game for quite a few years until Dark Souls, and then suddenly it was just like well over 100 hours, and I was just kind of pretty amazed with that. And Dark Souls 2 was not bad, but yeah, I'm pretty curious to see what happens with Bloodborne.
Hopefully it'll come out for the PC. I don't think I'm gonna buy a PS4 just for that. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. My little brother is like a console maniac, so I always know that I don't have to buy. I haven't got any of the new consoles, but I know that he's got both of them, and so I can just borrow his once he's finished with Bloodborne.
All right. So, anything else y'all would like to talk about concerning Crawl or Powerhoof, or anything to the fans, or literally anything, or have we wasted enough precious dev time already?
Well, it's Saturday. We're taking it easy today anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to, thank the constant kind words from everyone on the internet. Our community has been awesome. When we started this, there was a lot of people warning us about the internet being really kind of mean and, lots of bad comments and stuff. And like, there's maybe that like fraction of a percent of people who are like, oh, I hate pixel art or whatever. But, we've just been pretty amazed with how like nice and supportive everyone is. And so, yeah, I just, thanks everyone who's played the game and said nice things about it or has told a friend about it or, has just, yeah, generally been really nice and supportive to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, everybody, since you're already here, you might as well subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to visit our site, tinktink.org, for all of your gaming needs. Also, if you've heard of Crawl and haven't played it, do yourself a favor, grab some friends, go give it a try. It's really fun, and even though it's on early access, it's a complete game. Might as well be. It's good. Also, special thanks to Dave and Barney for talking with us today. It's been really nice.
Cheers.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Thank y'all. And this has been Josh Wilson. And as always, thanks for listening to tinktink.org interviews.